Last week, a legal judgment was handed down against Google, specifically relating to its search engine business. The results of that lawsuit could in turn lead to a complete loss of almost all of the revenue coming into Mozilla, the makers of Firefox. If that should happen, this could literally spell the end of Mozilla, at least as we know it, and potentially the end of Firefox as we know it. And I'm going to put this out there. Maybe that's not just such a bad thing. Maybe that's not the end of the world scenario. Maybe that could be the best possible thing for Firefox going forward and for web browsing going forward. I'm going to read some of this article to you now because understanding what's happening with this lawsuit is important to understanding what is likely to happen going forward. And I'm going to quote the article to you now. You can go feel free to read it over at lunduke.locals.com. It's no secret that Mozilla has been, for several years, almost entirely reliant on funding from Google in order to bankroll the continued development of Firefox. In fact, over 80% of Mozilla's revenue comes directly from a deal where Google is made the default search engine within Firefox. This is, 80%. It's a lot of money when it's just coming from one deal. Holy heavens. Now, a legal ruling against Google declaring that the company Google is an illegal monopoly in the search engine market, that could cause all of that funding of Mozilla to dry up in an instant, possibly putting Mozilla out of business in the process. Now, here's some of the details on the lawsuit. On October 20th, 2020, the USA's Department of Justice, along with 11 states, filed suit against Google, specifically alleging that Google held a monopoly on the search engine market and had engaged in anti-competitive practices. Now, on October 5th, just this last week, U.S. District Judge Amit Mehta, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name there, ruled against Google, right? Google lost this one. I'm not going to read all of the ruling here. I link to it so you can read the 100+ pages of the ruling. I'm just going to read a couple of quick little phrases here because they're really interesting. The judge ruled that Google is in fact a monopolist relating to the search market and was in violation of Section 2 of the Sherman Act. That's a particularly important one. That Google has monopoly power, that Google's distribution agreements are exclusive and have anti-competitive effects, and Google has not offered a valid pro-competitive justification for those agreements. Importantly, the court also finds that Google has exercised its monopoly power by charging super competitive prices for general search text ads. Okay, all right, so what does that all mean? It means that in part that Google may be forced to significantly change how it operates its search business, which includes paying companies like Mozilla and Apple for default or prominent search engine placement. Now, right? Because Google is the default search engine in Firefox, and Mozilla gets a bunch of money for that. Google is the default search engine in Safari, and Apple gets a bunch of money for that. This has been going on for years. Everyone knows it. It's not a secret, but it is a lot of money changes hands in order to keep this happening. So, how does this impact Firefox and Mozilla? Well, some of the details documented in the lawsuit, including in the deposition with Mozilla's ex-CEO Mitchell Baker. By the way, Mitchell Baker is no longer the CEO of Mozilla. The way all of that happened, she stepped down, groomed a new CEO to take her place. The board intervened and like did some weird, crazy, discriminatory thing against the new CEO to be, and there was this Game of Thrones style power struggle. It was crazy. It was absolutely insane. There's a lawsuit against Mozilla happening right now because of all of that. If you want to read all about that, I link to it a little bit further down this article. You can go check it out at the Lunduke Journal. But from the August 5th ruling, Google has also has revenue sharing agreement with the browser developer Mozilla, whereby it pays Mozilla a percentage revenue share in exchange for the default search placement on the Firefox web browser. Okay, fair enough. And the revenue share paid under the Google-Mozilla agreement drops from a 1 undisclosed percent to a smaller but still completely secret undisclosed percentage should Mozilla implement something like a this time search with this search engine feature on its mobile application. In short, Google pays, just to be clear about this, a set revenue sharing percentage to Mozilla to be the default search engine. We don't know what that percentage is. That's all redacted and super secret. But we do know that the easier Firefox makes it to use a non-Google search engine, particularly on the mobile application, that Google will punish Mozilla and give them less money, right? So because of all of this, that's just a lot of ammunition for the government to go after Google for being anti-competitive. It's really an easy case for them to make, and that's why, in part, Google lost. Now, another little tidbit from the deposition of Mitchell Baker, the ex-Mozilla CEO, that revealed that Google's 2021 revenue share payment to Mozilla was over $400 million, which we generally assumed, but we did not have the concrete details around that, or about 80% of Mozilla's operating budget. Mozilla has repeatedly made clear that without these payments, it would not be able to function as it does today, all of which just simply confirms what we have all been able to assume for a number of years. Mozilla is dependent on Google to fund current operations. This isn't a surprise. We knew this was coming. We've all been talking about this for quite some time. The Lunduke Journal has been covering it for years. Now, should Google be prohibited from continuing this existing deal, it could require a dramatic change to Mozilla, right? Either by forcing Mozilla to find other funding sources or to engage in massive layoffs. But the question is, will Google be prohibited from continuing such a default search engine deal with Mozilla and others like Apple, right? Will they be allowed to continue doing that, or will they be forced to stop? That remains to be seen. It seems likely, though. But at this point, Google is likely to appeal their loss here, right? They're going to appeal the current ruling, which will likely delay any remedy phase of the case. And should Google's appeal ultimately fail, which I think it is likely to, if you read through the details of this ruling, there's just too much going against Google here. It's too easily defined. I just don't see Google winning an appeal here. Now, the remedy and penalty phase of the case could go in a bunch of different directions, right? Realistically, what is decided in order to remedy the problem that's Google is facing here, it could go in a lot of directions. Just the same. It seems incredibly likely that prohibiting the default search engine deals, like we've been talking about with Mozilla or with Apple and Safari, as they currently exist, seems like an obvious remedy that is likely to be implemented. Why? Because those specific deals are called out as a reason why Google was found guilty, basically here, right? The judge has ruled against Google because of those deals. So it seems highly unlikely that a future judge would allow those deals to continue, right? So those deals are going to go away. That just seems like 99% sure at this point. It's not 100%, but pretty doggone close. And should that happen, which it probably will, Mozilla's finances will change in a major way. Mozilla's finances, upended, earthquake, volcano, tsunami. This is massive. 80% of your revenue going away in the blink of an eye. It will have a massive impact on any business. That's put you out of business the very next day caliber of, oh my gosh, this is bad. But none of this will be a surprise to Mozilla, right? The corporation has clearly seen this coming because they're not dumb. Right? We've all been talking about it. The Lunduke Journal isn't even the only one covering this, though I've covered it the most in depth. But other people have been noticing this and pointing to this for years. It is a concern. It is an issue. And Mozilla knows this, right? They're no dummies. Now, the Firefox mega corporation, and before I get any guff for calling them a mega corporation, yes, I know Firefox also has a foundation, or the Mozilla is a foundation and a mega corporation. One owns the other, but the funding essentially comes through and the employment essentially exists within the mega corporation. Hundreds of millions of dollars flow through the Mozilla mega corporation. It's a mega corporation. It both legally, as far as the tax records go, and practically. They just are. We go into that in depth. So anyone who wants to get grouchy with me because I'm not calling it a foundation, deal with it. So So the mega corporation behind Firefox has been making significant changes to their business over the last few years, clearly in preparation for something like this, right? They've been downplaying their flagship product of Firefox while focusing on AI investments. I mean, their president of Mozilla made a big announcement of their 15 or 25-year plan, which doesn't include Firefox as a product at all. They simply talk about the need for new AI-driven products that are like Firefox in popularity, because Firefox was popular. But they need new big cash cows that have nothing to do with Firefox. They've talked about this quite a bit. They've also purchased an advertising company and are quickly restructuring themselves to be an advertising company, along with making changes to Firefox to support the new Mozilla advertising company. And I link, by the way, I link to articles where I detail all of this. And which I should point out that none of this is speculation. This is all what they're doing. These are all their corporate filings, their annual reports, their published public roadmaps, all these sorts of things. I quote in them. So if you don't like any of the things that I'm saying about what Mozilla is doing, don't take it up with me. Go yell at Mozilla. I'm just reporting what is happening here. And there's also been massive internal power struggles inside Mozilla that seem focused on rebuilding the company as an advertising company. By the way, I link to that particular article. You got to read it if you haven't already. It is Game of Thrones worthy. Like, I'm surprised there's not dragons and beheadings and all that sort of thing. Like, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Just the same, I digress. Considering the lack of realized revenue from their artificial intelligence or their advertising initiatives, it's hard to see how Mozilla will weather this storm without significant layoffs, right? They have a limited amount of time, and when we're talking potentially months before this revenue could dry up. I mean, should an appeal get drug out, and should the remedy phase get drug out on the Google lawsuit, Mozilla could have a year, maybe even a little bit more of time before this funding goes away. But the writing is on the wall. It's gonna go away. And as yet, Mozilla has yet to get any of their alternative revenue sources and future products, the AI stuff, the advertising stuff and whatnot, to become profitable. Right? They don't have that yet. They don't have a profitable breakout product like Firefox yet. So they're in trouble. They're in a lot of trouble here. And the timing and the details of what happens next, and I mean, it remains to be seen. This could be coming in a matter of months. This could be coming in a matter of a year or two. It's somewhere in there seems the most likely, just judging by how these cases go. And we're going to go on to a couple other topics very, very, very briefly. However, before we do that, I want to posit something to all of you. That should all of this happen, and it is seemingly highly likely that it does, where all of this funding is going to dry up and Mozilla is going to be faced with a significant restructuring, possibly 80+% layoffs, possibly having to break into multiple different organizations, or downright almost going out of business entirely. I'm going to posit that that's not the worst thing to happen. Because the reality is Mozilla, as it currently stands, is really far from the Mozilla that many individuals kind of fell in love with in the early days of Firefox and whatnot. Over the last several years, they have become an increasingly political organization, spending huge amounts of money on political causes that have absolutely nothing to do with web browsing or web technology. They spend a lot of money actively promoting extremely racist causes. They do very, very strange woke DEI-related stuff, and they make a point of saying flat out that their end goal is to remove people they disagree with from the internet, right? This is not an organization that is actively promoting a free and open web at this point. That is not what they do. That is maybe what they did, but that is not what they currently do, right? Most of you will be very familiar with the phrase, do more than deplatforming, right? Some time back, You may remember President Trump got banned from Twitter. You guys remember when that happened? When Trump got banned from Twitter, the Mozilla organization celebrated it, right? They said how great it was that a politician, a sitting president, got banned off of parts of the internet, got deplatformed, if you will. And they made a big statement about, and this was from their head. This wasn't from like, some guy in accounting did a blog post. This was from, I believe, their president at the time. Came out and stated that they needed to do more than deplatforming of people, right? If they were Republican, if they were conservative, if they were right-leaning politically, essentially if they disagreed with the individuals who were currently leading Mozilla, that they needed to be more than deplatformed. So what does that mean? Deplatforming means that they are essentially banned from services like microblogging services, YouTube and video hosting services, blogging platforms and web forums and the like, right? So they're deplatformed. They no longer have a place to publish their thoughts or ideas or comments on things. But Mozilla's goal was to do more than that. Right? Now, the only thing that's left, once you kick someone off of every major online service and make it so they can't post anything online, the only thing left is to make it so that they can't get online at all. So Mozilla has repeatedly stated that their goal is to make sure conservatives, Republicans, right-leaning individuals, anyone who disagrees with them politically, centrists, should not be allowed on the internet. That's crazy. Right? That's a crazy statement. Many people will hear me say that and be like, Lunduke, you're crazy. Go look at their words. Don't look at my judgment of them. Don't look at my opinion of them. Go look at their words. So they've talked about this and they've acted upon this. I mean, look when they ousted their ex-interim CEO, Brendan Eich, the creator of JavaScript. They kicked him out of the organization, essentially, because they didn't like his politics. That's really what it came down to. They disagreed with his politics and his religious faith. And so they kicked him out, essentially. They forced him out of the organization. I know he kind of was forced to quit, blah, blah, blah. But essentially, they kicked him out. And so we've seen a lot of these sorts of things happening with Mozilla. And these are the sorts of things you don't want to see happening in the developer of a communications tool, of a web browser. You'd like to think that a web browser is pure technology, right? Anyone can use it for the free and open exchange of information and the free and open web. But that's not how Mozilla sees Firefox at this point. It is a means to censor those that they disagree with, to remove people from the internet entirely. So maybe Mozilla going out of business, maybe Mozilla losing all of its funding is a blessing in disguise, an opportunity for Firefox to become its own thing again, possibly to be picked up by a separate organization, forked, and Mozilla can be left in a burning pile of rubble, and Firefox can be reborn, as its name would suggest, as a phoenix, like it originally was named, and rise again as a non-political browser for the future. That would be a fantastic thing for Firefox. That would be a fantastic thing for a free and open web. So I don't necessarily see the end of Mozilla as a bad thing. It's hard to be upset about that. And likewise, Mozilla is clearly trying to diversify, but they're diversifying away from a free and open web towards artificial intelligence and advertising. They want to be an advertising broker selling AI services. That's what they want. That's what they're investing in. That's what they state is part of their 15 or 25 or however many year roadmap plan that they published. That's the goal? Well, it certainly does seem that way. I mean, they've been implementing new advertising-specific features into recent releases of Firefox ever since the big Game of Thrones-style coup that occurred within there just a few months back. And they're really just railroading down the tracks, pushing towards that goal of being an advertising company with just breakneck speed, just reckless abandon. So that's the way they're going. And if that's the way they're going, is this a Mozilla we really want to be around? Maybe not. Maybe it doesn't need to exist. Either this is going to cause them to shake everything up, get back to their basics, start fresh, excuse me, start fresh, be a scrappy web browser focused underdog again, or they go out of business and someone takes over Firefox. Or this just creates additional space for other upstart organizations to come in and create new web browsers like what Firefox did, like what we're seeing with Ladybird. Who knows, right? So I'm going to say flat out that this may not be bad. In fact, this may be a wonderful blessing. You hate to champion the death of organizations, especially ones that have done good in the past, like Mozilla. They have done good in the past, but it might be a good thing. Now, before we go, I want to call out two things. Two rather amusing tidbits that came out of this legal ruling. I read the whole gosh darn thing, and we could quote a whole bunch of stuff, but I want to talk about two things. The first is that the government sees Mozilla as a very marginal thing, right? Like they reference Mozilla plenty inside this particular legal document. But they're very clear that, Mozilla, they're barely hanging on, right? So within the August 5th ruling, there was a number of statements regarding the Firefox market share, which I couldn't help but find somewhat amusing. Quote, Firefox's contribution to the overall search market is so small that the additional output it produces at most marginal pro-competitive benefits. And quote, its share of the browser market is so low that it does not move the competitive needle. I love that almost sets it up as a joke. The Firefox's share of the browser market is so low. How low is it? That it does not move the competitive needle. Now we've seen this go so long. We've seen the market share of Firefox go so low over the last several years, and we've all seen it happen. But to hear lawyers and judges call it out as well, like, woo, even non-technical judges and lawyers, they notice Firefox's market share is not good and it's not going in a good direction. It is almost completely irrelevant. It's marginal. Ouch. Ouch. The other thing I want to talk about was Firefox is experimenting on users. Now, we've known some of this. This isn't a secret. However, to see this called out really drives home how funky it is. The ruling including several references, often from the Mozilla ex-CEO's deposition, to experiments run on Firefox users, specifically switching the default search engine for small subsets of users. And I'm just going to quote two little bits here. Mozilla has run experiments to assess a potential switch of the default search engine from Google to a rival. It tends to run these experiments when its agreements come up for renewal. And, quote, from 2021 to 2022, Mozilla once again switched the default search engine to Bing for 0.5% of desktop Firefox users, end quote. Now, this sort of experiment was apparently repeated regularly. It's quoted many times throughout this legal ruling. Have you ever noticed your Firefox default search engine change on you? Just out of nowhere, your search engine was now Bing. You may have been part of one of Mozilla's many experiments on their users, and considering the rocky terrain that Mozilla is facing, in part as a consequence of this Google ruling, my guess is that we'll see Mozilla Firefox conducting many additional such experiments in the months ahead. I just felt like that was worth pointing out, that Mozilla does that a bit. This isn't the first time we've talked about Mozilla doing something in Firefox that people didn't want to happen and didn't approve of happening. They change settings all the time. You remember the was it Mr. Robot? Yeah, the Mr. Robot extension. They installed a Mr. Robot extension into Firefox without you asking for it. This happened sometime back as an advertising thing. They struck a deal with the Mr. Robot show. They got paid to shove an extension into there specifically to promote Mr. Robot without even asking for it. And they changed search engines on you without asking for it. They changed privacy settings on you without asking for it or even telling you about it. Firefox does this a lot. Again, It's just so many things like this. It makes you wonder, would it be so bad if Mozilla no longer had control of Firefox? If Mozilla was no longer in business, would that really be a bad thing? Would that really hurt Firefox even? That might help Firefox. That might make Firefox better. We might, if Mozilla went away right now, Firefox got split off and a bunch of ragtag people put together a loosely knit organization to keep it going in a non-political way with none of their experiments and their settings changes and their advertising APIs that they are inserting into Firefox. Just get rid of all that. I think we might see Firefox market share take off. Maybe not through the roof, but I could see it going from its whatever it is 2% now up to 4 or 5%. I could see that happening. So maybe it's not so bad at all. Maybe it's not so bad. And with that, lady, by the way, before we head off, I want to say thank you to all of the subscribers of the Lunduke Journal. Go to lunduke.com or lunduke.locals.com if you want to help, if you want to support the work that I do here at the Lunduke Journal. I absolutely could not do this without all of you. One of the only outlets of tech journalism that doesn't take a single dime from big tech or medium tech or small tech. No tech company pays any money to the Lunduke Journal, no matter how nicely they ask, no matter how big a wads of cash they offer. No. Purely funded from subscriptions from people like you. Nerds like you make this possible, so I don't have to listen to anybody. Red Hat and IBM and Microsoft and Amazon and Mozilla and Oracle, they can't tell me what to say, what to think, nothing. I can just quote them and mock them as much as I want. And that's thanks to all of you. Couldn't do it without you. All right, with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.